Hello, welcome to Prairie Conservation Action Plan's Native Prairie Speaker Series. My name is Caitlin Morose, and I am the Stewardship Coordinator with Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or PCAP. Every month, PCAP asks someone to present either in the form of a webinar or an in-person talk in a Saskatchewan community on anything to do with native prairie conservation or species at risk. Stay tuned for our upcoming Native Prairie Speaker Series. If you are in the Saskatoon area on May 23rd, swing by Winston's Pub for our speaker series. That's Tuesday, May 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Carrie Hecker from Environment and Climate Change Canada will be doing a presentation about piping plover critical habitat on Last Mountain Lake National Wildlife Area. This event is part of the Saskatoon Nature City Festival. I'd like to take a moment to note that in-kind support for today's webinar has been given by the Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan. This project was undertaken with the financial support of the Government of Canada and the Federal Department of Environment and Climate Change Canada. Just a reminder to our listeners out there, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type it into the question section on the webinar dashboard. Our presenter, Chet, will answer them at the end of his talk. A bit about our presenter. Chet Neufeld is the Executive Director of the Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan and founder and current chair of the Saskatchewan Invasive Species Council. He was born and raised in Swift Current and got his Bachelor of Science from the University of Lethbridge. He has worked for Agriculture Canada, Environment Canada, and has consulted with various agencies. His work has included projects dealing with climate change and native grasses, restoration of native prairie, rare plant surveys, seed bank studies, and invasive species management. He specializes in plant ecology and is also a professional agrologist with the Saskatchewan Institute of Agrologists. So I'd like to turn it over to Chet. Chet?
Thank you very much. Can you see the my presentation on the screen?
Not yet. Let's try that again.
Okay. How about now?
Yes, we can see your presentation and we can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much, Caitlin. Caitlin, I appreciate the opportunity to do this talk. And thanks everybody for attending the webinar. So my talk will be on the Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan's Master Naturalist Program. And just to start, I'll give you a little overview of who we are as the Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan in case you're not familiar with us. Our vision is an expanded knowledge and appreciation of Saskatchewan's native plants. That's a pretty broad vision. We fulfill that vision a number of ways through what we're doing today, various projects on the ground, educational projects, you name it, we're involved with it. Our mission is to promote understanding and conservation of native plants and their ecosystems by facilitating communication, research, and education. So we like to have our projects fall into one of those three broad categories: communication, research, or education. We are a member-driven registered charity. We have about 200 plus members, mostly in Saskatchewan, but also BC, Alberta, and Manitoba. We've got probably a few Saskatchewan residents that have retired there, or people who are just interested in what we're doing. And the main thing is that we try to work with everybody, all stakeholders involved in native plants, and we'd like to be impartial. So we sit at the same table as oil companies and environmental activists, and we're kind of that neutral party that just tries to achieve consensus-based positive results for native plants and ecosystems. So the project I'll talk about today is our Master Naturalist Program. The aim of this, just to give you a little background, is to develop a network of volunteer citizen scientists who assist ecological organizations with things like data collection. A lot of different organizations collect data or need data collected. Ecological education, that's very, very important. Community engagement is also important, and the ecological education and community engagement sometimes go together. And natural area stewardship, a number of different organizations, many nonprofits are tasked with stewarding natural areas. And so if you're not familiar with citizen science, I've got just a little definition there for you. A little on the history of Master Naturalist programs, including ours. Ours is not a novel concept. This is a borrowed idea, as much as I would like to say that this is my genius and I thought of it all. It's not the case. I can take credit for recognizing a good idea when I see it. And when I came across other state Master Naturalist programs, I thought, that's a great idea. We need to have that here in Saskatchewan. The one that I first saw was Texas Master Naturalist Program. And the reason why we saw this is actually the Native Plant Society liaises with many, many different other native plant and related organizations throughout Canada and the United States, including Texas. Believe it or not, we do share some of the same species and issues and programs as places as far away as Texas. So that's where I first found out about theirs. They have arguably the most well-developed Master Naturalist Program in the United States, probably in North America. It's also one of the oldest, although other states do have very, very well-developed programs in place. The Canadian equivalent, the best program other than ours in Canada would be the Edmonton Master Naturalist Program, and I will talk about that in a little bit. So that's kind of where we get our inspiration from, as well as a lot of the format and content. And I had talked to the organizers of both of those programs in order to just get a little advice and to avoid the same stumbling blocks they may have faltered on. Then we also got guidance from other similar initiatives like the Master Gardener Program. They have various learning modules that people go through, and they're very experienced in running a very efficient and effective program. So I would be remiss to not have talked to folks like the Master Gardener organizers. So why do we need a Master Naturalist Program? Well, through my experience with the Native Plant Society and liaising with other nonprofits and conservation organizations, I kind of saw that there was a dual need. For the Native Plant Society's part, we're always looking for volunteers. We need volunteers because there just isn't enough money to go around. If we were to pay for everything that we did on conservation projects, we would be belly up very, very quickly, as would all of the other nonprofits out there that are doing conservation projects. I also was getting in my email inbox on a weekly basis through the summer months requests from people wanting to be involved. They wanted to volunteer, they wanted to help out, they wanted to learn more about our environment. And so I thought, wait a minute, we've got the Native Plant Society and many, many other organizations who need people. we've got people contacting me wanting opportunities. I see a win-win situation. Let's put this together. However, a bit of the stumbling block was that if we took on volunteers, we couldn't just give them, we couldn't just give them a GPS unit and say, map out this wetland, for example. There'd have to be training. I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could have this army of trained volunteers who knew what they were doing, and we could just give them this GPS instead of spending the morning teaching them on site. So it was a great opportunity. So here's a timeline of when we first kind of got started or tried to get off the ground in 2013. I recognized the idea. I put together a proposal to EcoAction, which is a funding program of Environment and Climate Change Canada. We were denied. And the reason why I put these in here is because if there's anybody thinking about trying to get something off the ground, don't take no for an answer. If you think it's a good idea, just keep hammering away at it. And that's what I did. I put a really good proposal in, and they said no. It just didn't align with what they were funding that year. I didn't give up. I asked again in 2015. I thought I'd give it a rest in 2014 with respect to the EcoAction Fund. They denied me again, but I knew that sooner or later I would get through to somebody and we could get this off the ground. And as it turns out, it was Environment and Climate Change Canada, just not the EcoAction Fund. But somebody on the review panel did see the merit of this program and forwarded it to another funding program through their Grants and Contributions Fund. And also the City of Saskatoon saw the value in this. And so in 2015, we got a 3-year agreement from both of them, which was fantastic because that allowed us to not only get the program off the ground, but have a little bit of long-term vision as to where this program was going to go, at least in the next 3 years. So in 2015, I called together everybody I knew that I thought would be interested. You can see the list there. Under other concerned groups and citizens, we actually had individual people who were also kind of unaffiliated but really wanted to be involved and contribute. People like Candace Savage, who is an author from Saskatoon. Also in 2015, we had the Nature City Festival. It wasn't the first time we'd had it. The Native Plant Society is one of the key organizers of the Nature City Festival. And one of our keynote speakers was Grant Purcell from Edmonton's Office of Biodiversity. And one of the programs that he talked about was their highly successful Master Naturalist Program. And so with our funding confirmed and with this expert in-house, I picked his brain for as much information I could on what was working with their program, what wasn't working with their program, and kind of the timeline as to how they got to where they were. And he was very gracious, told me everything I needed to know, and also gave us any and all materials we wanted. He said, just take what we've got, adapt it for your own uses, and save yourself a lot of work. So that was fantastic. Texas also contributed that. Later that year, I think sometime in early summer, Eco-Friendly Saskatchewan did an article on our program. And about a week later, I think it was, CBC Saskatchewan picked the story up and put it on their website. And between those two articles, our program went from, you know, we'd met once and had confirmed funding, but other than that, not a lot had happened. Went from there to me getting probably 30 emails a day of people wanting to know more about this program and wanting to be involved. And so as a result, I had to set up a list because, you know, we didn't have anything at this point. We had this concept, and we had a direction forward. And so we were in the best possible situation in that we had all of this demand, and that when we were ready to deliver our program, we'd have this ready group of people waiting to take it. It's the first time I've ever been in that scenario where we haven't had to really do a lot of public outreach in order to get awareness of our program out there and get participation in our program. So from mid-2015 to late 2015, we had meetings to discuss the format of the program, the curriculum of the program. We looked at what Texas was doing. We looked at what Edmonton was doing. We looked at what a few others were doing. Ontario has a couple in select cities that are going. I think it was California had another one we looked at. Later in 2015, we had a few more organizations come on stream. So Brightwater Science and an Environmental Camp and the Saskatchewan Archaeological Society pitched in. They wanted to become involved as well. And then the University of Saskatchewan as well came on. Then right at the end of 2015 into early 2016, we came upon our finalized curriculum and format. And the first two learning modules that we were going to deliver would be Citizen Science module and the Urban Ecosystems module. And I'll tell you a little bit about the modules in a second. So for 2017, we've got two modules that are being planned right now that will be rolled out later in the year, probably mid to late summer. And that would be the Ecological Engagement module and the Prairie Ecosystems module. And I should mention that this program is still in the pilot phase. We have the two modules I just mentioned that have been developed and delivered once. We've got these other two, Ecological Engagement and Prairie Ecosystems, that will be developed and delivered this year. And then we've got a few more for next year. Once all of them have been developed and delivered, then we will look at the feedback we've gotten from participants, modify accordingly. We're going to try and find some additional funding for the next 3 to 5 years, and then we hope to expand this program province-wide. We've had a lot of interest outside of Saskatoon, which is our beta testing area right now. So why become a Master Naturalist? Number of reasons, some of which I already mentioned. You get to connect with other like-minded people who care about nature. Sometimes you may feel alone there. I know where I live, I'm kind of the nature nut, and there aren't very many like-minded individuals, so it's nice to connect with other like-minded people. It's also a huge learning opportunity. You get to learn about all sorts of ecological issues. You get hands-on training and practical skills experience. And that might be important if you're just a backyard naturalist, or even if you're a professional, say an environmental consultant who is, for example, an expert on birds, but you want to learn more about plants to kind of diversify your professional portfolio. You get to engage with other people and just have a good time outside. And you get to ultimately make a positive influence wherever you're interacting. So how does one become a Master Naturalist? You've got some of the modules I already mentioned, Citizen Science, Urban Ecosystems. Those are the ones that were held in 2016, Ecological Engagement, Prairie Ecosystems this year. Next year, we will try and get the rest of them developed, aquatic ecosystems, forest ecosystems, and archaeology. Once you've taken all 7 of those and contributed 35 hours of volunteer support, you get to call yourself a certified Saskatchewan Master Naturalist. So for each learning module, it kind of has the similar format. You have a written manual And that's good as a take-home resource and as a reference resource. You've got classroom instruction and exercises, and the instruction is quite dynamic and engaging. It's not just one person droning all day. It's a series of speakers, each who is an expert on their own particular topic, and they're short, so maybe about a half an hour. I'll show you a sample agenda here coming up. So it does keep your attention, and it is very engaging. And then you usually end the day with field instructions and field exercises. For 2017, we're looking at even a whole day's worth of field work and field exercises to complement the classroom curriculum. So here's a sample course outline. This one was from our citizen science module. So we start at 9 in the morning. You get a little intro to the program, little intro into citizen science, and by about 10 o'clock, you're looking at study design, protocols, record keeping. Why do we do this? Why it's important to do things a certain way. We're taking a break mid-morning. Then you're looking at an overview of volunteer opportunities and activities. Later in the morning, you're going through some of the smartphone apps that enable you to collect data, and as a citizen scientist, we have lunch. Then there's a few group activities, and we ended up doing an eco-blitz, which was just going out and collecting all of the information that we possibly could in a certain area. And that was at the Northeast Swale on the edge of Saskatoon here. So it's a really fun day. It's not that long. It's not that difficult. Anybody can do it. So just delving a little more into the written manual, there's an example on the right side of your screen there from Citizen Science. That's just the first page. Nothing too heavy, but very informative. Okay, now if you'll bear with me, it's a few pages long. I'm going to just read you the intro to our Urban Ecosystems Manual. It was written by Candace Savage, who, as I mentioned, is a local author in Saskatoon. She's an excellent author. She's an award-winning author, and we're very, very fortunate that she wanted to be part of this program. And so she wrote this intro to our Urban Ecosystems module to just give participants context. Often we're just living in this snapshot in time. And what I think she wanted to do, and certainly what we wanted the course to do, is just to get people's minds wrapped around what brought them to this place in time, and maybe where the future is for a certain location. And so the photo on your screen that you see right now, the little bit of city is the edge of Saskatoon, and that complex of wetlands and prairie is Saskatoon's Northeast Swale. And so that was one of the areas that she's writing about in this intro to the Urban Ecosystems module. So I'll just read a little bit here. Where is here? Our biological address. Every city has a unique ecological setting. Saskatoon is the only city that sits at 52 degrees north and 106 degrees west on these particular bends of this particular river, the South Saskatchewan. This may seem like an absurdly obvious statement, but it is really quite profound. Ecologically speaking, there's no place on earth quite like the city of Saskatoon. The built form of cities is repeatedly, endlessly, in similar ways all around the world, making one subdivision or strip mall seem very much like the next. But every city has its own unique ecological setting, its own biological address. Even in an urbanized landscape, natural forces like climate, soils, hydrology, geology, and wildlife set limits and open up possibilities for life. It is this specialness that gives a city its sense of place, a quality that urban planners say is critical to our economic and social well-being. Saskatoon, an ice age landscape. So what is so special about the setting of the city of Saskatoon? One way of answering this question is to recall the story of how our landscape was formed. The river valley, the rolling uplands where we've built our houses, the dotting of sloughs, the Northeast Swale, the Hudson Bay wetlands. Obviously, the whole long history of Earth happened right here, just as it did everywhere else. But the geological record of most of that story is buried deep under our feet. You'd have to dig down 175 feet or 55 meters, maybe even more, to hit bedrock and connect with the earliest chapters in that saga. What we see around us on the surface is the work of the last 2 to 2.5 million years, a mere instant in the history of Earth. During this period, massive flows of ice, a kilometer thick, growled over this place. There were 4 successive glaciations, advance and retreat, advance and retreat. The last in these series reached its maximum about 18,000 years ago, and then slowly began to withdraw northward. The big melt finally reached Saskatoon area about 12,000 years ago. In some places, the rotting ice simply dropped its load of sand and gravel to produce level, stony plains or hummocky knob and kettle terrain. Elsewhere, this rubble was elaborately reworked, either by rivers of meltwater that rushed in from the west or by water dammed up by walls of ice to the north that pooled across the landscape as glacial Lake Saskatoon. The Strawberry Hills, heaps of glacial debris, emerged from this lake as islands. At first, the rivers deviated across the landscape, and we can still see their abandoned stream beds in places like Hudson Bay wetlands in the northeast and small swales. In time, however, the drainage stabilized to form the North and South Saskatchewan rivers that we know today. True to their heritage, these rivers are still fed by remnant glaciers in the Columbia ice fields. Glacial interludes, life comes rushing in. Each time the Ice Age glaciers retreated from the land, life came rushing back in. During one interglacial period about 175,000 years ago, this place was home to species that we would recognize, such as pronghorn, beaver, and coyotes, and many that would strike us as wildly exotic. Western camels, plains llamas, giant ground sloth, extinct horses, and low-browed musk oxen. The fossilized remains of these animals are known from sites right inside the boundaries of the city of Saskatoon. And that's not all. In 1968, construction workers uncovered mammoth bones near the sewage treatment plant and White Swan Drive. When the fossils were submitted for carbon dating, they turned out to be much younger than the animals we've just been talking about, a mere 30,000 plus years old. A Clovis point dating back a good 10 or 11,000 years was found lying on the ground in Woodlawn Cemetery. Other spear points thought to be 8, 9, or 10,000 years old have been found just north of the airport in Diefenbaker Park, near Grasswood School, along Lorne Avenue, and in an archaeological dig on Broadway Avenue. I'm telling you all this because I think it's spectacularly interesting. I hope you agree, and because it helps us appreciate the grandeur of this ancient landscape. This place has a magnificent story to tell if we know how to read it. The Buffalo Prairie, the next chapter in the history, the second to last, opens about 6 or 7,000 years ago. By that time, the glaciers had long since faded from memory, and the mammoths and other formidable Ice Age mammals were lost to oblivion. If we could step back into that landscape, we would find it strange, but also strangely familiar. We'd see the river just where we expect to see it, and extending out from its banks in every direction, a rolling plain of mixed grass prairie, smelling of sage and wild roses and dotted with sloughs. From this point in the story onward, the record of human presence is both dense and compelling. There are important archaeological sites within the city, a campground and bison processing site at the landfill, for example, and a bison kill under a house on Avenue M, among many others. And then there's Wanuskewin, where the rich flora and fauna along Pimahawk Creek provided a refuge for people in good times and bad. According to archaeologist Nadia Smith, an area exhibiting an equivalent intensity of middle pre-contact period occupation is not known elsewhere within Saskatchewan or anywhere on the Canadian Northern Plains. Over the span of 300 generations, people kept coming here looking for fuel, shelter, food, water, medicinal plants, and the steep banks and gullies they needed for trapping buffalo, the means of survival. With repeated visitation, the area around Opimihaw Creek became sacred with ceremony and stories. It's weirdly exciting to imagine camels and three-toed horses walking around here, but if I could slip through a crack in time, this is where I'd want to end up, on the buffalo prairie of still quite recent past. Imagine buffalo, or to give them their full scientific dignity, bison, bison, bison. Imagine those dark, dusty beasts in herds beyond counting. Flights of pronghorns at every turn. Elk coming out of the misty valley to graze on the prairie at dawn. Grizzly bears snuffling for succulent roots along shorelines. Wolves threading across the prairies, trailing the great herds. One reason for this yearning is that it's also recent. There are still places in the province where you can see the hollows worn into the prairie by bison rolling in the dirt. But the other reason for my nostalgia is that, to a meaningful extent, that fundamental conditions that supported the buffalo prairie are still present. You are here. Hold on a minute, I hear you thinking. How can you have a functioning prairie ecosystem without wolves or bears or bison? Aren't you overlooking the traumatic changes that have befallen the ecosystem in the 20th century? And yes, it is true that agriculture settlement and urban development, whatever their benefits, have been achieved at a great ecological and human cost. In Saskatchewan, we've lost 40% of our sloughs, another unique legacy of the Ice Age. Did you know that the wetlands in the prairie pothole region produce up to 90% of all the wild ducklings that hatch on the entire continent in any given year? And yet we keep draining and bulldozing and leveling these biological powerhouses. The last century has also witnessed the loss of 80% of our natural grasslands in Saskatchewan. Around Saskatoon, the percentage is even higher, about 95%. The grasslands of North America, the former buffalo prairie, are now widely regarded as one of the most endangered ecosystems on Earth, and the losses are ongoing. You only have to look at the declines of grassland-dependent birds to know we're in crisis. And yet, so much endures. In Saskatoon, we are far enough west to limit our annual precipitation to an average of about 14 inches a year, most of which arrives as rain in May and June. But because of our northern latitude, our annual average temperature is low, a chilly 2 degrees Celsius. Neither desert nor forest, shortgrass prairie nor tall grass. We fall into the mid-zone of the moist mixed grass ecoregion. This refers to grasslands characterized by both ground-hugging grasses like blue grama and knee-high species, little blue stem and needle and thread, together with hundreds of species of rushes, sedges, and flowering plants. How will climate change alter these relationships? We're about to find out. But meanwhile, the sun is shining, the rain and snow keep falling, soils built on ice age silts and nourished by thousands of years of deeply rooted prairie plants are still capable of supporting abundance. And remarkably, although we've lost important subspecies like the plains grizzly, we have not lost any species to extinction as far as we know. We still have all the pieces. So here we are in 2017 in a pretty little prairie city on the banks of an ice age river on the northernmost edge of one of the world's great grasslands. It's a place with a deep and amazing story, a saga to which with every house we build and garden we plant, we are adding a new chapter. This place won't look the same here when we are finished with it, but it can be full of life. So that's the primer to our urban ecosystems module, and I thought it was just a great way of kind of bringing everybody's minds to the present and looking towards the future. So as far as the course content, the classroom instruction goes, it builds on the instruction manual that I just outlined for you. It also does a pretty good job of supplementing the classroom, the verbal instruction through some hands-on learning exercises. And the photo that you see there to the right is, that was at Wanuskewin earlier this year. We had the citizen science module. That was the second time that we've held it, just to give people a chance to take it who initially missed it. And then, of course, the last third component is the field component. And so we get people out and just comfortable with being outdoors. Some people like the outdoors. Some people are comfortable in the outdoors. Not everybody is as comfortable as everybody else out there, and or as fluent with everything around them. So we just help to familiarize them with everything, or as much as we can that's relevant, and just have fun in some field-based learning. So as far as the time commitment for each module, what you're looking at is the classroom component is 1 day, the field component is a day, and then throughout your entire program, as I mentioned in a previous slide there, you have to volunteer 35 hours. And how we track the volunteer hours is we've got volunteer management software. Each user has a unique account, it's a free account, and they can just log in the hours whenever they contribute volunteer hours. We may audit those accounts just to keep people honest. And we do send out periodically volunteer opportunities to anybody that has signed up for our Master Naturalist program, whether or not they've actually taken the courses yet or not. We've got a mailing list of 100+ people, and we'll send out these volunteer events. But if people want to volunteer for an event that isn't on our list or that we haven't sent out, you know, it's also acceptable as long as it's within the same type of thing. I mean, you can't go out and give blood and say, well, I'd like to count that towards the Master Naturalist program. And it has to be, you know, a related event, but it doesn't have to be, you know, one of quote unquote our events or one of our partners. So the next steps for the program, as I mentioned, we're in the pilot phase still. We are soliciting and incorporating participant feedback. So for every module, there is a questionnaire rating. How did you like this? What would you like to see different, if anything? And then we're taking all of that feedback and using it to modify the ones that we've already developed and delivered, but also trying to incorporate it into the ones we will be developing and delivering. Short-term funding, as I mentioned, is secure. I'm actively looking for longer-term funding. If we don't find the funding, we do have a plan in place, but it will kind of resemble more of a fee-based system, similar to what the Master Gardeners do, where they charge maybe $100 or $200 per module in order to just cover costs. I would like to avoid that so that it's not a financial barrier to anybody, but we need to have a plan B in order to keep the program going, because that's the main thing, is that the program continues. In the coming years, we will keep rerunning the learning modules in order to give everybody a chance to take them. I realize everybody is busy, and we like to keep the classes small, about 25 to 30 people at the most. And if you've got a list of 100+ people, you're going to have multiple opportunities to take all of the learning events. And then in the future, we will also incorporate supplemental learning events. So if you've already become a Master Naturalist, you've got your 7 modules and you're 35 hours in, we don't want that to be the end of the road for you. We want to provide additional learning opportunities. So the Native Plant Society might have a baby botany workshop where we teach you how to identify the different plant families and become, you know, better specifically in botany. Or Nature Saskatchewan might have a birding workshop where they teach you all about warblers and how to identify warblers when they come through in the springtime, or something like that. Just continual ongoing learning opportunities to help people with their development and help keep them engaged. So the next courses we're offering, I mentioned, summer 2017, probably July, August. We're going to spread across the province. The next location we'll probably try this in would be Regina, and then out from there. I definitely do not want to avoid the rural areas. I really want to engage rural communities. We just need to find locations that will offer the best opportunity to those in rural areas who want to take it and not have to be able to drive too far. So we need to figure out where the best rural locations might be to hold these. And then finally, my thank you slide. All of our partners listed there on the right-hand side. There are a number of individuals listed at the bottom that are unaffiliated with organizations. Thank you especially to our funders, the City of Saskatoon, Environment and Climate Change Canada. They have been just fantastic people to work with, and they've just given us so much opportunity and creative license, really. They've been quite hands-off with how we should develop this and have let us just take the reins. And then also the Texas Master Naturalist Program and Edmonton Master Naturalist Program. They've been very, very good to us as far as giving us content and advice. And if anybody needs to contact me about the program or anything else, just feel free to use any of those methods there on the screen.
Thank you very much, Chet. That was a very informative presentation. I would just like to remind all of our listeners out there that if you have any questions, please feel free to type it into the question section of the webinar dashboard. We have a couple questions here from a listener named Stephen. He would like to know how he can find out the amount of native grasslands still protected by government mandate.
Oh, that is a good question. Still protected by government mandate. That's, if it's provincial government, one of the things you could do is contact the Provincial Ministry of Agriculture. If it's the federal government he's speaking about, it would be probably Environment and Climate Change Canada, possibly Agriculture Canada, although to a lesser extent, because their involvement with the pastures is diminishing. There's not an easy way to find that out. The Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan has an old publication. It's called Saskatchewan's Native Prairie, Taking Stock of a Vanishing Ecosystem and Dwindling Resource. Now, that was put out a number of years ago, 2001, so the data is old. However, it does outline the remaining prairie, and it does draw a few conclusions as to what each parcel of prairie is under as far as private ownership versus Crown ownership. This information is being updated. There's currently a project to quantify all the native prairie remaining in Saskatchewan, and once that project is done, we'll have a much better idea of exactly how much is left and how much of that is under some kind of Crown protection. But until that time, we're dealing with, kind of fragmented data that you would have to pull from various sources to get. I'm not sure that's a really good answer, but it does take a considerable amount of work because different ministries and different federal departments own or are in charge of different pieces of properties. Even Department of National Defense would have CFB Dundurn. A great portion of that of which is native prairie. So.
Thank you for that answer, Chet. We have quite a few questions that have come in here. There's a question from a listener named Kendall, and she would like to know how to sign up for July-August 2017 modules.
Sure. So if you just send an email to the address on the screen, that's just say, I'm interested in the Master Naturalist Program, put me on your list. That's all that is needed. Yeah, we just need a name and an email address, and as soon as we have the program for this year developed and the dates chosen, we'll send out an email to everybody on the list.
Perfect. A listener named Hillary is wondering if there is a day of instruction and a day of field instruction for each module, or will it be one day of each in total?
Yeah, so last year there was an afternoon each of field instruction. This year there will be a day of classroom instruction for each module and likely a day of field instruction. One of the field days that we are planning is going to be out at Last Mountain Lake National Wildlife Area. That's part of our funding agreement through Environment and Climate Change Canada, is that we visit one of their properties. That's a really great property to have it at because A, they've got a facility that we can use indoors for instruction as well as outdoors, and B, it's not that far from the city, so it's an easy day trip. So what we might do is have that day be kind of do double duty for both of those upcoming learning modules, the ecological engagement and the prairie ecosystems module, and we'd have components related to both of those modules in the field day out at Last Mountain Lake. Of course, we'd also have outdoor field components in Saskatoon for both of those learning modules as well. We just have this extra field trip day out there. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Chet. A listener named Barry would like to know if he qualifies for a Master Naturalist in Saskatchewan. Are the credentials also applicable to other areas such as Calgary?
No, but they don't have a Master Naturalist program in Alberta. And really, it's not any kind of legal designation like I'm an agrologist, and that's a legal designation because we've got an Agrologist Act in the province. This isn't so binding. It's yeah, it would probably help you out professionally if that was your aim, because it would show that you have a really broad knowledge and you know, it is a thorough course, but no, there's no kind of official recognition of it.
Okay, perfect. There's a question from another listener named Stephen. He says, hello, Chet, well presented. If a module topic had been presented once before, such as soil classification/science, can another person present the same topic in a differing way to achieve Master Naturalist designation?
I'm not quite sure I'm picking up the question. So if soils have been presented once before, could they be presented again in a different way in another module? Is that the question?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we will, there are certain topics that are common to all of these Master Naturalist learning modules, and we will retouch on a number of them. So yeah, if you're talking about soils, for example, we may just go through in the citizen science one talking about the different soil classification, the soil classification system and how you would classify a soil, basically. just kind of scratching the surface of that. Now, if we went into prairie ecosystems, obviously different prairie ecosystems occupy different soil types and soil zones, and we could talk about the influence of that on those prairie ecosystems and right down to various plant communities, on a smaller scale. So we definitely would touch on those larger topics multiple times throughout, just to kind of get that common thread weaving through.
Okay. Thanks, Chet. And Stephen, if you're still out there, if you still have more questions, please feel free to type that in. We have a question from a listener named Marley, and she would like to know, what is the level of support that you receive from the provincial government?
To date, we haven't received any support from the provincial government outside of, so no funding, but to be fair, we also haven't applied to them for funding. As far as kind of in-kind or personnel support, our board, the Native Plant Society's board, has a number of provincial government employees sitting on our board, and so we've received support through them. And then as far as ministries go at the ministerial level, we don't have any that have signed on as far as a partner organization in our list formally, but we do from time to time get some input from them, especially regarding module development, or if we would need some kind of information that the province would be best to provide in order to develop our modules. We definitely get that from them.
Great, thank you, Chet. There's a question from a listener named Gretchen. Will this program cover plants only, or would it touch on wildlife as well as birds and mammals?
Yeah, no, it covers everything. We don't want it to just be plant-focused. The Native Plant Society is plant-focused, and that's our job. But the job of this Master Naturalist program is to give a very broad overview. So when we're talking about prairie ecology, we're not just talking about the plants that are there. We're talking about the insects, the mammals, the birds, everything, the climate, the soils, the people. There's going to be an Aboriginal component to it as well. So that the first people that were stewards of the land. It's going to be very all-encompassing, because we want people to come away with that comprehensive knowledge of a topic.
Great, thank you, Chet. A listener named Stephen would like to know, this question actually came from earlier in the presentation, what does impartial mean when discussing native plants? Is this the same as nonpartisan?
Yes, yeah, for our intents and purposes here, we can say nonpartisan. So all of what the Native Plant Society does is science-based and nonpartisan, and we're a registered charity. So there is a very, very small amount of any kind of lobbying we can do. We actually, as the Native Plant Society, do not do any lobbying. But for all registered charities, there's a limit to the amount of lobbying, like a legal limit set out by the Canadian Revenue Agency. We don't do it. We advocate for native plants and ecosystems. So, and we found that that's the most effective approach for us. It allows us to talk to everybody. We aren't seen as being on a quote-unquote side. We're just on the side for nature. So we've written letters to advocate for prairie protection to all governments. Doesn't matter who's in power. They've all gotten a letter at some point in time from us.
That's great. So Chet, I was just wondering, since the Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan is a registered charity, if somebody wanted to make a donation, can they get a charitable tax receipt?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're just like any other registered charity. All of your tax donations are deductible. They can make the donation through our website store or sending a check in the mail.
Okay,
And the other thing, sorry, Caitlin, I guess I could mention, if you're making a donation, you can make a donation to the general operations, or you can make a specific donation. So you can say, I want my money to go to the Master Naturalist Program, or I want my money to go to rare plant conservation programs that the Native Plant Society runs. Because it's your money, you have the power to direct that donation to where you want it to go.
Okay, that's great to know. Thank you. It looks like we have one more question here from the same listener named Stephen. He would like to know, what does the research say as to how much prairie ecosystem is needed to maintain important plant and animal species? It's a tough question.
Yeah, and there's no easy answer, but right now, you know, we're less than 20% native prairie remaining in the province. That's not good. I mean, if you're to get 20% on a test, you wouldn't feel so great about yourself. However, I guess there is a little bit of a silver lining in that we've got, of the states and provinces that have native prairie remaining, we have quite a bit. Relatively speaking, and actually, you know, in the actual number of acres or hectares or however you want to quantify the area. And we're also lucky in that where it exists are in large chunks. So if you think about, I'm in Saskatchewan right now, we do have little tiny pieces of prairie around the city, the Northeast Swale, the Small Swale, different things. But the Dundurn Sandhills, where the PFRA pastures were, and whatever that is going to come to now for some kind of ranching co-op, and CFB Dundurn, so all of those land holders have basically an intact ecosystem right there, and it's huge. And so that ecosystem is in pretty good shape because of its size. And research will show you that the larger a piece of prairie is, the more resilient it is. I think there was one paper showing that anything under 5 acres in size, don't quote me on this, but I think it was 5 acres in size, really doesn't have a whole lot of chance without some fairly intense management to help keep it there, just because of the edge effects and different things. But if you get these large chunks, like southwestern Saskatchewan is a very large chunk of prairie by and large, it's got a decent chance of persisting, and the biodiversity in there, I've been all throughout those areas, is really quite good. We haven't lost a whole lot at this point in those areas, despite the fact that, you know, we have lost 80% elsewhere.
Well, thank you for that question. That's a tough question. I think with that, that's all of the questions that our listeners have typed in here. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much, Chet, for this really, really informative presentation. I know I learned a lot. And I'd like to thank all of our listeners there for tuning in today. At the end of this presentation, you will receive a quick questionnaire, and we'll just ask everyone to fill that out if you don't mind. It'll take about a minute, and it helps us for funding to do this again in the future. And for other upcoming events going on, please check out the PCAP website, www.pcap-sk.org, and you can click on Communications and Native Prairie Speaker Series. Also, this video has been recorded, and it will be uploaded to the PCAP YouTube channel later today, and that's youtube.com/user/skpcap, and we'll also share the link on our Facebook page. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you again, Chet, for the great presentation. And I would just like to wish everyone a great rest of your day and enjoy this beautiful spring weather that we have. So thank you.